I am so sorry, but my daughter Brooke is no longer in her right mind. She is a danger to herself and this foundation. My mother Helena sobbed into the microphone, her face a mask of practiced tragedy for the live stream cameras. I am Brooke Foster. As the two guards gripped my arms in front of 300 horrified guests, I did not scream, I did not fight. I simply looked at my sister Chloe, who was recording my breakdown on her phone, and felt a cold, sharp clarity. They thought they were protecting their image. They thought a forced psych ward stay would bury the truth about what they did to my father. They had no idea that I had been recording them from the moment I stepped into this ballroom. They did not know that every lie they told tonight was being uploaded to a server they could not touch. They were about to learn that you should never try to trap a crisis manager who has already planned for the worst-case scenario. Before I show you how I turned their cage into their prison, please like and subscribe, but only if you believe that a mother's love should never be a weapon. And I always want to know where these stories are reaching people, so tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your city right now. Now let me take you back to 2 weeks ago, when the first recording began. I spend my life cleaning up other people's blood and broken glass. As a crisis manager for the high-profile elite, I am the person you call when your reputation is bleeding out on the pavement. I have handled disgraced senators, billionaire heirs caught in scandals, and corporate giants facing collapse. My job requires a heart of ice and a mind that functions like a high-speed processor. I do not feel, I observe, I do not react, I calculate. But when the crisis finally came for the Foster family, I realized that all my professional training had been a rehearsal for a war I never wanted to fight. My father, Arthur Foster, was the heartbeat of the Foster Foundation. He was a quiet man with silver hair and a gentle laugh that never quite fit into the polished marble halls of our estate. He spent 30 years building a legacy of genuine charity, funding schools and clinics across the country. He was the only person in that house who didn't care about lighting or camera angles. To him, the work was everything. To my mother Helena and my sister Chloe, the work was simply the stage on which they performed their public identities. 6 months ago, the world I knew shattered. I was in London, settling a messy inheritance dispute for a client, when my phone buzzed with 42 missed calls. My father was dead. The official report said it was a sudden heart attack brought on by the stress of an internal audit. But the news that followed was worse than the grief. The Foster Foundation was missing $4,800,000. My mother and Chloe held a televised press conference within 48 hours. With tears in their eyes, they presented a paper trail that pointed directly to my father. They told the world that the man I idolized had been a common thief, a gambler who had bet the foundation's future and lost. I didn't believe it for a second. My father lived on coffee and old books, he didn't have a secret life, and he certainly didn't have a gambling addiction. When I flew back to the United States 2 weeks ago, I didn't come home to mourn, I came home to investigate. The Foster estate felt like a mausoleum dressed in silk. Helena greeted me in the grand foyer wearing a black lace dress that cost more than most people's annual salary. She smelled of expensive lilies and something metallic, like cold coins. She hugged me, but her eyes were already scanning the hallway behind me, checking to see if I had brought any press with me. "Brooke, darling," she whispered, her voice like velvet stretched over dry bone. "You look tired. You've always been so fragile, so easily overwhelmed by the weight of this family. We've missed you." Fragile? It was the first seed she planted. She didn't say I was sad, she didn't say I was grieving, she said I was fragile. In the world of crisis management, that word is a death sentence. It implies a lack of control. Chloe was even worse. My younger sister had transformed herself into a social media saint. Her entire life was a series of curated moments designed to show her bravery in the face of our father betrayal. Every time I walked into a room, she was there with her phone out, recording a video about her journey toward healing. She treated our father memory like a prop. "We have to move forward, Brooke," Chloe told me during my first night back as she adjusted her ring light in the library. "The foundation brand is at stake. Mark says we need to distance ourselves from Dad's name entirely. It's the only way to save our future." Mark Parker was the family lawyer and Chloe's fiancé. He was a man who smiled too much and blinked too little. He had been my father's apprentice, a boy Dad had mentored with paternal pride. Now he sat in my father's chair wearing my father's gold watch and signed documents that erased my father's life. I spent my first week pretending to comply. I played the role of the grieving, fragile daughter. I let them think I was struggling to keep my head above water, but while they were busy filming content and planning galas, I was searching. I spent my nights in the basement archives, looking through the digital logs they thought they had wiped. The first micro twist came on a Tuesday night. I found my father's old hearing aid in a box of junk meant for the trash. My father had suffered from progressive hearing loss in his final years. He had used a top-of-the-line model, the kind that synced to an encrypted cloud app to help him remember conversations. He called it his digital brain. I sat on the cold basement floor and powered it on. My hands shook as I opened the connected app on my private tablet. There were dozens of recordings from his final weeks. They weren't just conversations, they were evidence. I heard my mother's voice, clear and cold, threatening him. I heard Mark Parker explaining how they would move the funds. But the most chilling discovery was the call logs. In the 3 hours before he died, my father had tried to call me 14 times. Every single call had been redirected and blocked. My mother hadn't just watched him die, she had cut off his only lifeline. The surface of our home remained perfect. We ate dinner in silence, the silver clinking against fine china. Helena would ask me if I was taking my vitamins, her tone dripping with fake maternal concern. Chloe would post pictures of us together with captions about sisterly bonds. But underneath the surface, I was a wolf in the fold. I was building a digital fortress, uploading every recording to a secure server. One evening, Helena came into my room and handed me a gift. It was a beautiful silver brooch in the shape of a lily of the valley. It was the same flower my father used to bring me every spring. A peace offering, she said, pinning it to my lapel. So you always remember that I'm looking out for you. I smiled at her, though my skin crawled. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was marking me. She was setting the stage for the public to see a daughter who was drifting away, so that when she finally locked me up, no one would ask questions. Little did she know, that brooch was the perfect place for me to hide a microtransmitter of my own. We were both playing a game of shadows now, only one of us was a professional. The pressure in the Foster estate didn't come all at once. It was a slow, deliberate rising of the tide. Every morning I would find a new bottle of calming supplements on my nightstand that I hadn't asked for. Every afternoon I would catch Chloe filming me from across the garden, her face twisted into a mask of theatrical pity for her followers. She was building a digital paper trail of my supposed instability, one 10-second clip at a time. The captions were always the same. Watching my sister struggle is the hardest part of this journey, or please pray for Brooke healing. She wasn't praying for me, she was preparing the jury of public opinion. The surface emotion in the house was pure, concentrated care. Helena would stroke my hair and tell me I looked peaked, her eyes cold and calculating even as her voice trembled with fake emotion. But underneath that surface there was a frantic current of movement. The audit of the Foster Foundation was moving faster than they expected. $4,800,000 is a lot of money to hide, even for a woman as experienced as my mother. On Wednesday evening, Helena informed me that a dear friend of the family was coming over for dinner. His name was Dr. Hayes. I knew the name. He was a high-priced psychiatrist who specialized in discreet transitions for wealthy families who wanted their problematic relatives to simply go away. He wasn't there for a meal, he was there for an evaluation. Dinner was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I sat at the long mahogany table, the silver heavy in my hand, and watched them perform. Mark Parker sat to my left, leaning in close, his voice a low, soothing hum as he talked about the foundation's restructuring. Chloe sat opposite me, her phone resting against a crystal water glass, recording the entire interaction under the guise of checking her emails. "Brooke, dear," Dr. Hayes said, his voice as smooth as polished stone. "Your mother tells me you've been having trouble sleeping, that you've been hearing things in the basement at night. Distorted voices? Perhaps your father's voice." I looked at him, my expression blank. I felt the weight of the silver lily brooch on my lapel. I knew they were waiting for me to snap. They wanted me to scream that I wasn't crazy. They wanted me to cry about the recordings I had found. But as a crisis manager, I knew that the moment you become defensive, you've already lost the room. "I think everyone hears echoes of the people they've lost, doctor," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "Don't you? Grief isn't a straight line, it's a circle." I saw Helena exchange a quick, sharp glance with Mark. That wasn't the answer they wanted. They wanted a breakdown. They wanted me to confirm the fragile narrative. "But you've been obsessive, haven't you?" Chloe interrupted, her eyes bright with malice. "You spent 6 hours in the archives yesterday, you aren't eating." "You're talking to yourself, Brooke, I heard you." I took a slow sip of my wine. "I was just organizing Dad notes, Chloe. He had a lot of things he wanted to say before he died, things he never got the chance to finish." The air in the room curdled. Mark grip tightened on his fork until his knuckles turned white. He knew exactly what I was implying. He was the one who had helped Helena move the $4 million into a shell company called Lily Management, a name that was a cruel joke at my expense. After dinner I retreated to my room, but I didn't stay there. I used the back service stairs to slip into the library's hidden alcove. I had left my father's hearing aid, now functioning as a high-sensitivity microphone, tucked into the base of a heavy bronze statue on the mantelpiece. I sat in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, and listened through my earpiece. "She's smarter than we gave her credit for," I heard Mark's voice, stripped of its polished legal tone. It was harsh, jagged with anxiety. "She digging, Helena. If she finds the transfer codes to the offshore accounts, the audit won't just hit the foundation, it'll hit us. All of us." "She won't find anything," Helena replied, her voice as cold as a winter morning. "Dr. Hayes is already drafting the emergency hold papers. We'll use the gala. It's the perfect setting. 300 witnesses to her breakdown. Once she's in the facility, she'll be under a medical conservatorship. I'll have total control over her legal and financial rights. Her evidence will be dismissed as the delusions of a grieving woman. And the money? Chloe asked. I could hear the rustle of silk as she paced the room. The audit is on Monday. The final transfer happens tonight, Helena said. $4,800,000 will be cleared by morning. By the time Brooke wakes up in the clinic, the paper trail will be a dead end. I leaned my head against the cold stone wall of the alcove. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just trying to hide the theft, they were using my father's death to fund their escape. My father hadn't died of a heart attack. He had died of a broken heart, realized too late that he was married to a monster. I felt a surge of pure white-hot fury, but I forced it down. I needed to remain the fragile daughter for 3 more days. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to believe that their cage was working. The next morning I allowed Chloe to catch me crying in the garden. I made sure my hair was slightly messy, my eyes red from a lack of sleep. I played the part so well that I saw her smirk as she took a photo. She thought she was documenting my collapse. She didn't realize she was documenting the exact moment I stopped being her sister and started being her executioner. Stay with me, because what happens next isn't just a reveal, it's a total dismantling of every lie they ever told. The 48 hours before the gala were a masterclass in psychological theater. I stayed in my room, curtains drawn, allowing the dust to settle on my skin and the dark circles under my eyes to deepen. I made sure Chloe saw me staring at blank walls. I made sure Helena heard me whispering to myself when she passed my door. To them I was a broken machine, a threat that was successfully neutralizing itself. But behind my closed eyelids I was navigating a digital maze that they didn't even know existed. A crisis manager's greatest weapon is redundancy. I didn't just have the recordings from my father's hearing aid. I had linked the silver lily brooch Helena gave me to a secure offshore cloud server. Every breath she took near me, every whispered instruction she gave to Mark Parker, was being broadcast in real time to a vault in Switzerland. I was a walking, breathing wiretap. On Friday morning I found the final piece of the puzzle. I had used a remote mirror script to track the outgoing traffic from Mark's laptop. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning a transfer of $4,800,000 was initiated. It didn't go to a bank, it went to a digital wallet associated with Lily Management. But here was the mistake they made in their arrogance. They used the Foundation internal server to mask the IP address. They thought they were being clever by using the house-owned hardware, but all they did was tie the theft to the Foster estate physical location. They had left a digital fingerprint on the murder weapon. I sat in the dark, the blue light of my tablet reflecting in my eyes, and felt a cold, hollow sense of triumph. I had enough to go to the police right then. I had the recordings of them admitting to the theft. I had the bank trail. I could have ended it in a quiet office with a few detectives. But as I looked at the photo of my father on my nightstand, his eyes kind and unsuspecting, I knew that a quiet ending wasn't enough. Helena and Chloe didn't just steal money, they stole a man's honor. They turned his life work into a punchline. They needed to fall in the same way they lived, in front of an audience, under the brightest lights, where the world could watch the mask shatter into 1,000 unfixable pieces. That was when I decided on the turn. I wasn't going to run from the psych ward, I was going to walk right into it. I needed Dr. Hayes to commit a felony. If I exposed them at the gala and they simply walked away, they could hire better lawyers, hide the money deeper, and tie me up in court for a decade. But if they actually followed through with the forced commitment, if they used a bribed doctor to imprison a sane woman, I would have them for kidnapping, medical fraud, and conspiracy. I was going to let them think they had won the war, just long enough for me to lock the gates of the prison they had built for me. Mark Parker came to my room an hour before we had to leave for the gala. He didn't knock. He just pushed the door open and stood there, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and predatory hunger. "It's time, Brooke," he said, his voice a low, rehearsed hum. "The car is waiting. Your mother wants you to wear the blue silk. It makes you look peaceful." "Peaceful," I repeated, my voice thin and hollow. I stood up, swaying slightly for effect. "Is that what I am, Mark? Or am I just in the way?" He walked over to me, his hand resting on my shoulder. His touch made my stomach turn, but I didn't flinch. "You're tired, Brooke. After tonight you won't have to worry about anything anymore. No foundation, no audits, no ghosts. We're going to take care of everything." "I know you are," I whispered. I let him lead me downstairs. Helena was waiting in the foyer, a vision in emerald green. She looked like a queen preparing for a coronation. Chloe was already in the limousine, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone as she posted a final update about our family difficult night. As we drove toward the ballroom, the city lights blurred into long golden streaks against the window. I felt the weight of the silver brooch on my chest. It felt like a shield. "You look beautiful, darling," Helena said, reaching over to pat my hand. Her touch was dry and cold. "Just remember to stay close to me. If you feel overwhelmed, just squeeze my hand. Dr. Hayes will be right there to help you." "I'll remember," I said. I looked out at the passing buildings and realized that for the first time in 2 weeks I wasn't afraid. I was a crisis manager. I had analyzed the threat, identified the vulnerabilities, and deployed the solution. The gala was meant to be my ending, but I was going to make it their autopsy. Before I take you into that ballroom, I have to ask, have you ever had to play the victim just to catch the villain? It's a dangerous game, but sometimes it's the only way to ensure they never hurt anyone else. Stay with me, because the next 30 minutes changed everything. The grand ballroom was a cathedral of glass and light, filled with the 300 most influential people in the city. The air was thick with the scent of gardenias and the low, constant hum of elite conversation. As we entered, the flashes of the cameras were blinding, a rhythmic pulse of white light that Helena and Chloe moved through with the practiced ease of royalty. I walked between them, my head bowed, my shoulders slumped. I played the part of the broken daughter so well that I could feel the pity from the crowd radiating toward me like heat. Stay close, Brooke, Helena whispered, her hand a vice-like grip on my elbow. Smile for the cameras, just for a moment. Let them see you're safe with us. I didn't smile. I let my gaze wander aimlessly, looking like a woman lost in a fog. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Mark Parker moving toward the tech booth at the back of the hall. He was coordinating with the livestream producers to ensure the tragic announcement would be clipped and shared instantly across every major social platform. Chloe was already live on her own account, whispering into her phone about the heavy heart she carried tonight. At exactly 9 o'clock, the house lights dimmed and a single spotlight found Helena at the mahogany podium. The room went silent. She looked magnificent in her emerald gown, the perfect image of a grieving widow carrying the weight of a fallen empire. Friends, supporters, and partners, Helena began, her voice amplified and echoing with a manufactured tremor. Tonight was meant to be a celebration of my late husband's vision. But as many of you know, the Foster family has faced unimaginable trials recently. We have lost so much, and tonight I must share a burden that has become too heavy to carry in private. She turned her head slightly, looking toward me where I stood at the edge of the stage. A second spotlight hit me, cold and unforgiving. I squinted against the light, making sure the 300 guests saw the confusion on my face. My daughter Brooke has been my rock, Helena continued, her eyes filling with well-timed tears. But the trauma of her father passing and the discoveries about his business dealings have been too much for her beautiful mind to bear. She has begun to suffer from severe delusions. She hears voices. She believes in conspiracies that do not exist. As her mother, I can no longer stand by and watch her disappear into this darkness. A murmur of shock rippled through the ballroom. I saw people leaning in, their phones raised to capture my humiliation. Mark Parker signaled to two large men in dark suits standing near the wings. They began to move toward me. With the heavy heart of a mother, Helena cried, her voice rising for the climax of her performance, and under the expert guidance of Dr. Hayes, I have made the most difficult decision of my life. Brooke will be entering a private care facility tonight to begin her journey back to us. We ask for your prayers and your privacy. The two guards reached me. Each one took an arm, their grip firm and painful. Dr. Hayes stepped out from the shadows, a small medical bag in his hand. He looked at me with a sickeningly sweet expression of professional concern. It's time to rest, Brooke, he said, loud enough for the front row to hear. This was the moment. This was the exact second they thought they had erased me. I looked up, and for the first time in 2 weeks the fog vanished from my eyes. I didn't pull away from the guards. I stood perfectly still and I smiled. It wasn't a smile of madness, it was the sharp, predatory grin of a crisis manager who just closed the trap. I agree, Mother, I said, my voice cutting through her theatrical sobbing like a blade. It is time for the truth to come out. But we don't need prayers, we need an audit. I reached up and tapped the silver lily brooch on my lapel 3 times. Suddenly the massive LED screens behind Helena, the ones that had been displaying photos of my father's charity work, flickered and went black. A second later, a high-definition audio waveform appeared, and the speakers that had been playing Helena's speech began to blast a different sound. It was the recording from the library alcove. She digging, Helena, Mark's voice boomed through the ballroom, stripped of its legal polish. If she finds the transfer codes to the offshore accounts, the audit won't just hit the foundation. It'll hit us. All of us. The ballroom froze. I saw the color drain from Helena's face so fast it was like a curtain falling. Mark Parker looked at the tech booth, screaming for them to shut it off, but Owen, my father's old assistant, was already standing there with a thumb drive that had locked the entire system. She won't find anything, Helena's recorded voice replied, cold and murderous. Dr. Hayes is already drafting the emergency hold papers. We'll use the gala, at the perfect setting, 300 witnesses to her breakdown. Once she's in the facility, I'll have total control. The guests were no longer looking at me with pity. They were looking at the stage with horror. I saw the reporters in the front row frantically typing on their laptops. The live stream was still running, broadcasting the Foster family autopsy to a global audience of millions. I pulled my arms free from the guards. They were so stunned by the recording that they didn't even try to stop me. I walked toward the podium, stepping into the light that was meant to be my funeral pyre. You told them I was hearing voices, Mother, I said, my voice steady and echoing through the hall. You were right. I was hearing yours. I was hearing you plan how to steal $4,800,000 from the children my father died trying to protect. I was hearing you plan how to bribe a doctor to kidnap your own daughter. This is a fabrication, Helena shrieked, her voice cracking as she lunged for the microphone. It an AI trick. She insane. Is the bank transfer an AI trick too? I asked. I tapped my brooch again. The screens shifted from the audio waveform to a series of internal bank documents. It showed the $4,800,000 transfer to Lily Management, time-stamped at 3 o'clock this morning. It showed the IP address of the Foster estate. And finally it showed the personal signature of Mark Parker authorizing the bribe to Dr. Hayes. Chloe was still holding her phone, but her hand was shaking so hard she dropped it. The glass shattered on the marble floor, a sharp final sound that seemed to signal the end of their world. The heavy oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 12 officers from the State Police Financial Crimes Division marched down the center aisle. They weren't there for me. Helena Foster, Mark Parker, and Chloe Foster, the lead detective shouted, his voice echoing over the recording that was still playing in the background. You are under arrest for grand larceny, conspiracy, and medical fraud. Dr. Hayes tried to slip away through the side exit, but 2 more officers were already there, waiting with handcuffs. I stood on the stage and watched as they were led away. Helena didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked like a small, hollow woman who had traded her soul for a green dress and a pile of stolen money. As she passed me, her eyes met mine, filled with a hatred so pure it should have burned. I didn't look away. I didn't feel the need to shout. I had done my job. The ballroom was a chaos of shouting and flashing lights, but in the center of it all, I felt a strange, quiet peace. I looked up at the rafters and whispered a single word to my father. Done. The trial of the Foster family lasted 14 months. It was dubbed the trial of the decade by the news outlets that had once praised my mother as a saint. Helena and Chloe sat behind the defense table, their designer suits replaced by the drab professional attire their new lawyers insisted on. Mark Parker tried to negotiate a plea deal by testifying against Helena, but his own signatures on the transfer documents were too damning. In the end, Helena was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary for grand larceny and medical fraud. Chloe received 5 years for conspiracy, her social media accounts deactivated and her digital empire turned into a cautionary tale of greed. Dr. Hayes lost his medical license before the first hearing even began. He was sentenced to 8 years, a fitting end for a man who had sold his oath for a bribe. I didn't stay in the city to watch the sentencing. I had already done the only job that mattered. I spent 6 months working with a team of forensic accountants to recover every single cent of the $4,800,000. We tracked it through 3 different countries before finally returning it to the Foster Foundation. I didn't take over the organization. I knew my father would have wanted it to be led by people whose hearts were in the work, not in the family name. I oversaw the appointment of a new independent board of directors and then I walked away. I returned to my firm, but I shifted my focus. I still manage crises, but now I specialize in protecting those who have been silenced by power and wealth. I became the voice for the people who are being told they are crazy when they are actually just right. The Foster estate was sold at auction. I kept only one thing from that house, my father's old library desk. It sits in my new office, overlooking a quiet park where the lilies of the valley bloom every spring. Sometimes, when the room is quiet, I sit at that desk and touch the silver brooch I wore on the night of the gala. I don't wear it anymore. It sits in a small glass case, a reminder of the night the truth became louder than the lies. Healing wasn't a sudden moment of peace. It was a slow, difficult process of unlearning the fear my mother had spent decades planting in me. I had to learn that being strong doesn't mean having a heart of ice. It means having the courage to feel the pain and still move forward. I realized that my father didn't leave me a burden of shame. He left me the integrity to fix what was broken. I visited his grave for the first time without the cameras or the crowds. The headstone was simple, just as he would have wanted. Arthur Foster, a man of his word. I sat there for an hour, telling him about the schools we had saved and the clinics that were finally opening their doors. For the first time since I was a little girl, I felt like I was just a daughter again, not a crisis manager or an investigator. If you have ever felt like the people who should love you the most are the ones trying to erase you, please know this: their version of the story is not the final draft. You are the author of your own truth. You don't have to be a professional to stand up for what is right. You just have to be willing to look at the darkness and refuse to blink. If this story helped you find a little bit of your own strength, please leave a comment below. I want to hear about the moments you chose yourself over a lie. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video to support more stories of justice and reclamation. Your support means we can keep telling the truths that others want to bury. Until next time, stay sharp, stay honest, and never let anyone tell you that your voice doesn't matter.